Why was Julius Caesar assassinated? Or, from the words of those with bloodied hands, why was the tyrant executed? Great honesty is necessary on the part of students of history to admit the limits of our knowledge. Few topics relating to Rome are victimized by generalization and insular perspectives, more than the question, why did Rome fall and why was Caesar killed? When viewing the assassination of Caesar, the religious motivation is often set aside as though religion was a plebeian distraction puppeted by the senatorial class. Caesar is often said to have needed to be taken out, forgive the euphemism, because he was a political threat to jealous opponents, and he was a threat to the mos maiorum, or the social order, or he was seen as a tyrant who wanted to destroy the republic, which required patristic loyalists to water the fields of liberty. Examining a topic in an academic perspective leaves open room for many viewpoints, and so it is necessary to communicate that we should not presume with an absolutism that our individual perspectives on history are the singularly correct lens through which it should be viewed. Emphases do matter, available sources do disagree, and they have varying reputation and reliability, and so based on different inputs, different outputs can be reached. Often the religious motivation to execute the so-called tyrant, Gaius Julius Caesar, is dismissed, but considering a religious motivation does aid in tying up otherwise loose ends. I'll gloss over the perceived divine origins of Rome, you can see a previous video on that. But the Roman system of government was seen as being instituted by the Saturn and the gods. Laws were created according to divinely sanctioned procedure, and religious rites protected the legitimacy and assured the divine favor. It could be said then that violating the legal procedures in the Senate could be an analog or an equivalent to saying the wrong prayers when consecrating farmland by sacrifice. Each error or illicit deviation was seen as allowing room for the ire of the gods, and it would suspend the legal requirement for divine assistance, which had been promised to those who performed the rituals. That's to say that I do, so you do, the perspective of the Romans, meant that the gods were no longer required to see through in their protection or intercession. Caesar decided when consul that it was necessary, in order to push through various legislation and reforms, that days which his co-consul Bibulus had set aside as inauspicious would be days that politics are allowed to take place. Caesar, if you'll recall, was the Pontifex Maximus, the high priest of the Roman religion, and he saw himself as having the capacity and the authority to reclassify days that a legitimate political and religious individual had set aside. Objectively, contemporaries of Caesar at the time were seriously concerned by the decision to dismiss the threat to divine protection of Rome by subverting the declared inauspicious days. Caesar then was creating law, enforcing it, all against the will of the gods themselves, who seemingly had declared those days inauspicious through their representative in the Consul of Rome. Contemporaries at the time had the perspective that Caesar was perhaps breaking the contracts with the gods. If the city lost the foundation of Saturn and the legitimacy of divinely sanctioned law, the political body would become meaningless by having been cut off from its roots. Senators of Rome, during an official meeting, carrying out their offices, executed the man who used the very same setting previously to taunt the breaking of contracts with the gods, and thus threatened the foundations of the city Rome itself. Ultimately, the fruits of this event are that Caesar was killed, the Pontifex Maximus was killed, the city Rome lost the divine favor, visibly, through losing the structure of the Senate, through losing the structure of the Republic in the form of the new empire sanctioned and brought about through Caesar's descendants and Caesar Augustus himself.